Hello, everyone. This is Luke Johnson from Noetic.online, the tech ed, social, online, educational app and website. Back with our final edition of Soren Kierkegaard's Training in Christianity is Robert Schut. Take us home, Robert.
Okay. Well, kind of just pick up where we left off the last time, only a few days ago. Kierkegaard's talking about Nicodemus. He's going to start talking about Nicodemus again and the admirer and making the connection between Nicodemus being an admirer. He says that the admirer can rise to great heights. And on page 228, I'm going to read a bit of a quote here. This is someone who is observing. He's quoting someone, some fictitious person, who would be speaking about Nicodemus. And he would say something like this. It's my conviction that this doctrine is the truth, meaning the doctrine of Christ, by all that is holy. This is my conviction. In case it were necessary, I'm willing to die for it. In case all were to fall away, I will remain faithful. In case it were to become a despicable thing to be a Christian, yet I shall remain faithful. In case I had lived as a contemporary of Christ, I would not have come stealthily to him by night, for fundamentally Nicodemus was a weak man. So Kierkegaard is kind of putting the words in the mouth of somebody from Christendom who sits back and hears the pastor or the preacher talking about Nicodemus and how he was such a weak man. He came at night because he didn't want people to see him. And he's saying to himself, well, yeah, I would never do such a thing. That's why in the book, in case, the in case portion was italicized. So the idea is kind of emphasize the idea that I would not have done such a thing. And what Kierkegaard is saying is that actually these are the people who are weak. When everyone is a Christian and there's no real distinction between the admirer and the follower, then the follower is done away with. So his opinion is that all are Christians in Denmark at this time. He says his opinion is that all are Christians, but can't get any further than to claim their conviction as long as there's no danger. So they kind of live in this imaginary Christianity. And that's really what Christendom is. It's an imaginary Christianity, something that people create to make themselves feel more comfortable about their lack of devotion. And the fact that they really aren't a follower, but they're an admirer. So it's as though they take these basic ideas, Luke, and then create a church around them. And this is what we wind up with with Christendom, and this is what we wind up with today in different places that we go. You wonder why the gospel doesn't sound exactly the same as the scripture, and that's because they've created this church around themselves to justify themselves. The concept of the follower has passed away. The concept of a follower and an admirer has passed away. In other words, it's not that the admirer has passed away. It's that the contrast between the follower and the admirer has passed away. Everybody's become an admirer, so there's no one out there to look at and say, why is this person so different than I am? Everybody's the same in Christendom. Christianity must deny the world, but the admirer holds himself aloof. He's not willing to make sacrifices and give up anything worldly or reconstruct his life to become what he admires. And that's what Kierkegaard says as a follower, is one who reconstructs or changes their life in order to become the person that he admires. But he's always there to praise Christianity and even Christ. And so it becomes sometimes difficult to tell the wolves and the sheep apart. To become to determine the wheat from the tares, because they all are worshiping Christ. They all get up to have communion. They all say prayers together. How do you know which ones aren't? And for Kierkegaard, this became a problem. He kind of painted it with a broad brush and said, it appears that almost everybody is the admirer from his experience. The follower strives to become what he admires, he reminds us. Even if he lives in Christendom, there is a danger for him. So just because you live, and I can vouch for this in my life, and I think you can too, Luke, that
I would argue it could be harder within Christendom.
It can be, because people feel like they're defending something when you challenge it. So if you're, and we all live in Christendom, every age has a Christendom. It's not just Kierkegaard's age. So don't fool yourselves. Christendom exists and is alive and well here today. There's a danger when you're in Christendom when you start being a follower. The world, Christendom, had tried to transform the Christian life into something hidden. Now, this is kind of an interesting observation. So he says Christendom, instead of the Christian being something outward, he says that the church has tried to change it into something hidden and inward, almost like it's something deep spiritual level that one arrives at, that he no longer has to project himself as a Christian. He does this through some kind of a spiritual aura, I guess. Somehow he teaches. Go ahead, Luke.
So what do you think Kierkegaard... See, so much of what we've read about Kierkegaard is him emphasizing how important it is to inwardly develop, to internalize Christ, to draw closer to the truth, to let the truth reside within you. So much of what Kierkegaard talks about is inwardness. So how does that fit with this idea of Christendom wanting to make being a Christian kind of hidden? It seems like Kierkegaard's own philosophy and Christendom in some way might be in agreement. I think I understand where you're going to go with this, but for the discerning listener, I think it's worth taking a moment to draw that distinction.
Yeah, and I think he's going to do that as we continue on. And yes, I thought about that too, but I think he clears it up. And if I don't clear it up by the end, we'll revisit it to make sure that we do, because that's an important point. The idea is that one must not let their denunciation of the world be observed. So let's create an honorary Christian, like the man who gets an honorary doctor's degree. So now, I just want to make this clear to our audience. You have a real doctor's degree, right, Luke?
Yes. I did not. Despite my best efforts, I really tried to be famous and have a shortcut to my PhD, but fame was denied me, and I had to go the long toiling route.
Oh, yes, okay. Well, this is what Kierkegaard, this is kind of an interesting way to look at it. But the problem was, see, the inward idea was that you don't denounce the world. Everything is inward. So you don't need to stand up and say, that's not what a Christian is going to do. I'm not going to do that because that offends me as a Christian. So they would never do something like that in Christendom, because that would show outwardly that you're a Christian. So Kierkegaard is maintaining his inwardness, but he's saying there's a point that the inwardness becomes an outwardness when you are in the world. You have to let people know you're a Christian.
You have to let the world know what you're not going to tolerate. Right?
That's right.
Is that kind of the idea? So how did Kierkegaard, we kind of know his biography. How can we say that Kierkegaard lived that out? I mean, we could talk about his relationship with the Lutheran Church, right?
Yeah. Well, he was attacked by the newspaper there.
Right.
And he lashed out against them because he did so. We don't know too much about any other personal interaction that he had? Because he was kept to himself. He did so, a lot of this through his books, which would not exactly be, I guess, what we would call an outward manifestation. But he must have interacted with people as well. But he did keep to himself. So you're absolutely right. He did kind of keep to himself.
Right, but he did have the. Let me pull it up. But I don't know if it was the moment. Which text of his he actually found himself in direct collision with the Lutheran Church? Keep talking. I want to find that so I'm better sourced on this.
Yeah. No, it was the Corsair. I for a moment couldn't remember. The Corsair was the name of the paper that he had a lot of conflict with, and they kind of represented the church to a point. It represented the mob, the common people, which was Christendom. So what happens now is that Christianity became reflection. So this is how he makes the distinction between what he has, his inwardness, and this idea of reflection. The distinction between the admirer and the followers has passed away. The admirer has now taken a number one position. So if you think of these two things as kind of a hierarchy where you have the admirer and the follower should be number one. That's our goal, to become the follower. But in the world of Christendom, the admirer takes the number one position, and the follower soon becomes forgotten. And certainly overshadowed, to say the least, if not totally forgotten, by the admiration for Christ. So another group has arisen from Christendom called the free thinker. They have attacked, insulted, and derided Christianity even worse than the pagans. So he's speaking about this new group that has arisen in his time. And in comparison to the free thinkers, these admirers now begin to look pretty good. They even might look like Christians to the casual observer. So who these free thinkers are, we might say these were extreme liberals. We might say that they were, maybe they were atheists, at least agnostics, but people who certainly didn't believe in Christianity. But because of their extreme practice of the free thinkers, and he may have been talking about philosophers here, which he probably was, and he may have even been talking about Hegelians, this idea of free thinkers.
I wouldn't be surprised if this is an allusion to the Enlightenment in general as well.
Yes, it could be. It certainly could be. But he says, compared to these people in Christendom look pretty good, and they could almost be taken as followers because of this contrast between them. So in comparison to the free thinkers, the admirers look like they may be Christians. And the admirers have now become, for many, the true Christians. Another thing he brings up here now, he says, what has also entered into Christendom is called Christian art. It's inconceivable for Kierkegaard here to think about an artist who meditates on how to create a painting that expresses the pain and the anxiety and just the right color of the blood that Christ bled while creating a piece of artwork. That he says he himself could not do such a thing. He believes that such an effort to create an artistic rendering of the crucifixion would displease Christ. He didn't want to put on display, he didn't want himself in this manner to be put on display, especially as a piece of artwork. He wanted followers, not admirers. And Kierkegaard, I think, is saying that Jesus wanted people to follow his way and to walk in his footsteps, not to stand in front of a painting and admire it. And art tends to do that to us. It creates, and you'll see here as we go by, art creates a sense of reflection and inwardness as to what's going on here in this painting. And we become critics of art, and the true meaning of the art gets lost. And I think that's what he's trying to say here. He didn't want people to spend their lives trying to paint him. In other words, speaking for Jesus. He didn't say, well, yeah, I want to die for mankind so I could create artists who could make jewelry and who could create artwork and statues of me. He's saying, I want to die so that people will become followers. The art critic looks at the picture trying to decide if he got the color of the blood just right, and if the expression on Jesus' face really shows the expression of suffering. And neither finds an incentive to become a follower. Only the artist gets the admiration of the public. So art creates a sense of admiration. The public admires the painting, and in a sense, the artist admires himself for having created such a painting.
I have so many questions.
Okay, I thought you might.
Right. Okay, all right. So I want to add a little footnote here. The thing that I was trying to express earlier, where Kierkegaard was doing his attack on Christianity, it actually was through a newspaper, The Fatherland, and I remember that because I had done some work on The Moment. So there was the Corsair affair, which was a different scenario from what he was writing through The Fatherland. So I wanted to revisit that earlier.
Good.
So, okay, I heard what you said in one earphone, and then I was researching in the other, with the other ear and eye. So my brain was kind of split there for a second. I was two people. So forgive me if these questions seem silly. Is this true, what you just claimed about Kierkegaard, that sort of, if I do understand the claim, is that merely rendering Christ in art turns him into a subject of admiration? I mean, what is the person who has artistic gift, right? Mm-hmm. Artistic genius, who becomes a Christian? You know, they want to use their gift to serve the Lord, and say they want to do that by glorifying God, rendering a scene from the Bible, doing portraiture of Jesus. I think they would feel like they are helping to create followers of Jesus Christ by doing that. Just as you and I, who are sort of natural born educators, feel like we are helping people become followers of Jesus Christ by having these conversations and providing information to people. So there's that. And can we really say that art doesn't have that effect? I mean, art can be very, very powerful if viewed the right way. If you don't believe the underlying stories, the underlying events or whatever, mm-hmm. but people do have, I mean, the moral imagination is quite strong. And if you can give people a visual to help them get their minds around what was happening, could you not argue that it could help them become more authentic in their faith? I mean, I'm saying all this at the same time recognizing that there are prohibitions in the Old Testament about creating graven images as well. So I'm kind of two minds of this. So What do you think, Bob?
Well, let me start back. Let me work backwards from your last statement, because that's freshest in my memory. Yes, God, and interestingly, if people read the Bible very carefully, they'll find God prohibited them from creating an image and worshiping it. God had Moses create an image of a serpent. And it was through this image of a serpent that they were to look upon in order so that they would not be bitten by the poisonous snakes. So I don't remember where the story is. I believe it's in Exodus. So this was right near the end that the snakes kind of came upon them, poisonous snakes. So God had Moses make this serpent. I think it was a bronze serpent. I can't remember for sure. But anyway, so we have a little conflict there. God says, don't do it, and yet he instructed Moses. But the caveat or the difference is to worship. They did not worship the serpent. We have to remember that you spoke about art as being a gift. We have to remember art is not a gift of the Holy Spirit. Okay, so art is a gift. It's a human gift that we have. It's the ability to be able to teach through artwork. But that's the responsibility, just like a teacher, Luke. You and I are teachers. We have a responsibility to stay true to the gift that we have, to make sure that it does not turn into admiration, but that it I'm not here to be admired as a teacher, or that people would start quoting me and saying, oh, how genius he is, or whatever. The point is, we want to get across an idea. The idea is the gospel. That's the point we want to get across. So yeah, people who are artistic may want to get across the idea of the gospel. They have to be very careful, just like we are, that it doesn't turn into admiration. Look at the cinema. The cinema is a form of art. And you can see how the dangers of the cinema and portraying Christ on the cinema can mislead many into admiration for Christ and even distort the image of Christ away from the true Christ. So you have to take the responsibility of the gift, whatever gift it might be. So I don't know, that would be the best I can answer that. And also one more thing is that God will we can't judge something and say, but yes, God uses this movie. God, people are saved by this pastor. People are saved by this piece of art. God uses everything, Luke. He uses everything to reach people. And that doesn't give legitimacy to the means by which God reaches people. So my experience anyway is we have to be very careful. We don't make a one-to-one connection between how God reaches people. Like a person becomes a Rosicrucian and he finds Christ. That doesn't mean that God says, okay, I'm now blessing the Rosicrucian religion or whatever they call themselves.
Yeah, I don't think you're going to find Christ through Rosicrucianism, even though that might be the claim.
There are many cults that people do find Christ in, and they need to come out of them once they find Christ. Not say,
that's what I mean. I mean, you could maybe find it once you're in it, but you're not. It's not the pathway to it, and then you have to get rid of it. Like you might, like a drug addiction might help you find Christ.
Excellent point. Yeah, you might see God with LSD, but once you see him, stop taking the LSD.
Right.
If you're really seeing God. But yeah.
Well, by the way, I remember the brazen serpent or the bronze serpent episode from the Old Testament when I read it for the first time because it was so bizarre to me. I was like, I never heard about this in church.
Right.
It's actually in Numbers 21 verses 8.
Oh, Numbers. Oh, I got it right. I thought it was in Exodus. But yeah, thank you for giving the quotation. Yeah, it's certainly one when you read that does kind of stop you in your tracks there.
That and the talking donkey were really big surprises for me.
Talking ass, yes. So it says, only the artist gets the admiration of the public. Now, Kierkegaard here says he doesn't want to speak against the artist, for he knows that he himself is not a perfect Christian. He says that the admirer of Christ is not lukewarm, for they may have some passion for Christ, but only the follower is the true Christian. So he's kind of hedging a little bit here, but in a good way. He's saying, look, I don't want to put down the artist. Just kind of like a discussion that we had before. Yeah, God can use an artist, but he has to be very careful that he remains a follower and produces followers, not admirers. And he says the same thing here about admirers. He said, okay, so there's a lot of admirers out there, but an admirer is not lukewarm, for they may have some passion for Christ, but only the follower is a true Christian. So apparently this is kind of a sliding scale here. It's not like a switch you go on and off here. You may be an admirer and become passionate and then kind of spill over into a follower. So you might be seeing an admirer in the transition to become a follower. So this is, I think, what he's trying to get at here. It has almost gotten to the point that Christendom has to use art to stimulate such emotions, for they do not have such feelings within them. Now, this is a point that I don't know if I could make it as strong as he did it, but this has been a point throughout a lot of my Christian walk. My criticism for the cinema is that people go to the cinema and they feel sorry for Christ. They see him being beaten and bloody, and they come out in tears. Oh, best movie I've ever seen. And then after about a week, they go, or if even that long, they go right back to where they were before. Because these movies create emotions, but they're just that. They're superficial emotions. Like you would have for an accident. You drive past an accident, right, Luke? On the freeway. Guess what? You're going to drive really careful if you see a fatal accident. You're going to say, man, that was a terrible accident. The car is in flames. There's an ambulance. I'm going to drive a little slower now and be careful. But that only lasts for a little while. And then you go back to your old speeding habits and not stopping at stop streets and trying to make the amber light. So it's that kind of a thing with the cinema and artwork, I think he's trying to say. I'm just kind of updating it into our world. So we want to be careful that it doesn't just remain emotions. Even sermons have to become more like poetry in his day in order to flatter the hearers. And this is true in our day today. I remember one time, it was a long time ago, in the early 70s, if not the late 60s, where I went to, my pastor brought me to New York to see this famous evangelical pastor preach.
Is it David Wilkinson?
No, but it was in that area. It was during that time. It was a Pentecostal pastor. It was a Pentecostal church I was in, so I was familiar with all the stuff that goes on. But he got up there and he preached with a Shakespearean manner, where he was posing and pointing, and I'm thinking, man, what is going on here? This guy is acting. He's not preaching, he's acting. And it makes me remember that when Kierkegaard says that sermons have become more like poetry. Yeah. People are changing their sermons in order to flatter the hearers, to say what tickles their ears. And Kierkegaard here tries to show the sacred text must be understood. When he calls it the sacred text, of course he means the Bible. And the best interpreter, he thinks, is the Gospel of John. And let me bring up, let's see, John 12:31 here. I should have had this up on my screen, but it doesn't take long. 12:31. And he says here, now is the judgment of this world. Now the ruler of this world will be driven out. And I, when I'm lifted up from the earth, will draw people to myself. And that's the quotation he uses all the time. But I wanted to read the rest of it so that you get the context of it. Now he said this to indicate clearly what kind of a death he was going to die. Then the crowd responded, we've heard from the law that the Christ will remain forever. How can you say the Son of Man must be lifted up? Who is the Son of Man? And Jesus replied, the light is with you for a little while longer. Walk while you have the light, so that the darkness may not overtake you. The one who walks in the darkness does not know where he's going. While you have the light, believe in the light, so that you may become sons of the light. And when Jesus had said these things, he went away and hid himself from them. So it kind of gives you the context of the verse, that John gives you the interpretation of it. So Jesus is speaking here, walking in the light, and contrasting light and darkness. There's many people who walk in darkness and they don't know where they're going. And they trip and they stumble constantly because they don't know where they're going. They need to walk in the light. And that means a follower. And that's, I think, why he's using this verse, why he chose this verse over a lot of other ones. Because it really speaks to the follower. The admirer is the one who walks in darkness and trips and stumbles. With Christ's exaltation is the humiliation that he suffered. What he's saying here is that when we see Christ in his humiliated state as a man, that is, in a sense, his true exaltation for us. So we need to see Jesus as a human being, as a man, in order to become a better follower, rather than put him up in heaven, out of touch of reason and logic and everything else. That if Jesus is resurrected and is in heaven, he's far away from us. And we can only look from a distance, only look from afar and admire him. But if he's on earth, and if he's still present in spiritual form, then he's with us at every moment. And then we have to become a follower, not an admirer. And he ends the whole book here with a prayer that God would draw all men to himself. And he says here, just a couple excerpts from this prayer. He says there's 3 ways of going wrong: losing the way, stumbling in the way, and deviating from the way. And those are 3 kind of issues that's worth, a little meditation upon those things. So we can lose the way, where we just simply get distracted. We can stumble along the way because we walk in darkness and don't know where we're going. Or we can be deviated from the way by false teachings. So these are 3 ways that we want to kind of keep in our mind and be careful that we don't fall into the trap of any of them. And then he even prays for the ministers. He says a lot of negative things about parsons, but in the end of the book, he prays for them, which is, I think, showing Kierkegaard's character. And he ends by praying for the simple Christians, that they don't think poorly of themselves because they cannot bring others to Christ. So he's saying, don't measure yourselves and say, yeah, but I'm just a regular Christian. I go to church. I get communion. Who am I going to bring to Christ? I don't know the Bible that well. I don't know what to say. And Kierkegaard is saying, don't beat yourselves up. He says, not everybody is called to do that. So he offers them a prayer so that they don't think poorly of themselves. And this is God's domain to bring people to Christ, not man. So it's not that we should feel guilty about that. But we do have to exercise our gift, whatever that gift is. If it's teaching, if it is evangelism, if it's just good works, if it's even one of the gifts is making contributions. That's our gift, and that's what we must do. Make an effort to find your gift and then exercise it. But most of all, if you follow Christ, you will find the gift. You will. Now, my experience also on this is that people exercise their gift many times and don't know it. They don't know, and they don't think they've been gifted. They think, I haven't been given a gift. I got left out. But not really. If you watch a person who's walking with Christ, you can see a gift. And even if the gift is a gift of faith, even if the gift is perseverance or generosity or kindness, that's the gift that they might not even know they have. And that's one of the things that I think he may be trying to say a little awkwardly, but that's what I'm trying to say anyway. So even if we follow Christ, we will have a gift and we will demonstrate it, even if we don't know it.
I have to say, if you have the gift of kindness, you have one of the most prized gifts. The older I get, the more I value people who are just able to be kind.
Yeah.
Especially, I think, especially in the times that we're in, there's so much unkindness.
Yes. And I think it stands out. I think that's one of the things that people see kindness and they wonder, why are you so different than everybody else? And that's the opportunity to say, well, let me tell you, it's because of Jesus. So that's, again, if you're walking with God, he'll make an opportunity. Just like he does for you and for me. Look at where we are here. I never thought I'd be on a podcast reaching millions of people.
500 years into the future.
But
I've been doing a little time traveling, and Bob, I wanted to save it for the last episode. We are superstars in the year 2525.
Good.
We're totally obscure for a couple hundred years, but in 2525, we're all anybody can talk about.
Oh, well, I better take my Geritol every day to make sure that I last to 2025.
2525.
Oh, 2525. Well,
yeah, wow. I'm building an extra seat on the time machine for you. So So you're going to go with me the next time I go into the far future and experience the fame.
Do I get to ride in the sidecar?
Yeah, it's going to be like it's kind of you set up like one of those like when what is the sidecar call for the motorcycle? Is it just called sidecar?
It was called sidecar. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be kind of like that. It's like
okay.
It's like a time machine motorcycle sidecar contraption. That's how I time travel.
It sounds great. I can't wait.
But wait till we get to the year 802,701. Then things get really bad.
I'm hoping the Lord comes before then.
Yeah, it won't be long. It won't be long. All right. Well, Bob, thank you so much for a wonderful lesson and for really just taking control of the teaching on the podcast while I've been developing the other curriculum and trying to get this product launched. I from the deepest part of my heart, I am very, very thankful that you were able to do that.
Thank you. And I'm always thankful for the opportunity to talk about what I love so much. So.
All right. Well, I will edit this audio and get it up on Noetic.online. Be sure to create an account there. A lot of things are going to be happening in a short period of time, it seems. And you can also check this out for the time on YouTube and SoundCloud and your podcasting app. All right. Thank you, Bob.
Okay. Thank you, Luke. Bye to everybody. And again, any questions, just put something on the bottom there of our YouTube location or send us an email and we'll try to get to you.
All right. Fantastic. All right. Over and out.
Bye-bye.